On Sunday, the 10th of Nisan, Jesus had come to Jerusalem, presenting himself as their king, riding on a donkey, but without an army. He was presenting himself on the basis of the fact that he was the Son of God, appointed by God, and having presented the evidence, his credentials were the fact that the blind see, the deaf hear, the lame walk, the dumb speak, and everyone was amazed at the teaching that he gave. The general populace received him gladly, but the authorities had determined well before this that they must be rid of him, because they were not administering the nation in the way that Jesus was teaching. They were not walking in the ways that God expected. The evidence of this was that in the temple they were selling lambs and doves and changing money to exploit the requirements of Passover, that the children of Israel should present a sacrifice before the Lord. And Jesus had come along with a whip of cords and overturned the tables of the money changers and driven the animals out and the birds out, and would not let people carry wares through the temple, saying, "My Father's house is a house of prayer, but you've made it a den of thieves." The following day, which is now Tuesday, the 12th of Nisan, the chief priests and elders in charge of the temple had come to confront Jesus. By what authority you were doing these things? But when Jesus quizzed them, they refused to acknowledge the authority of John the Baptist. He was the last of the Old Testament servants of God sent to the people, and he had been executed, as many other prophets of the Old Testament had been. So Jesus refuses to formally say what his authority is, because they would not accept it anyway. But he tells the story of the vineyard. The vineyard is a picture of Israel in the Old Testament prophecies, and the vine dressers had refused to deliver the fruit to the owner, but had killed the servants sent to collect the fruit, the produce that the owner expected from his vineyard. So the owner had sent a son, saying, "They will respect my son," but they would kill the son, thinking the vineyard would be theirs. But the owner would come and take the vineyard away from them and give it to others. Jesus told them this story, and they understood plainly what he was saying, that Israel was the vineyard. They were the men in charge of the vineyard, and they were rejecting God's Son who came to them, and that judgment would come upon them. But they feared the multitude, and so though they wanted to arrest him, they were not able. They went away. Then they sent to him some of the Pharisees and the Herodians, to catch him in his words. When they had come, they said to him, "Teacher, we know that you are true and care about no one, for you do not regard the person of men, but teach the way of God in truth. Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not? Shall we pay, or shall we not pay?" But he, knowing their hypocrisy, said to them, "Why do you test me? Bring me a denarius, that I may see it." So they brought it. And he said to them, "Whose image and inscription is this?" They said to him, "Caesar's." And Jesus answered and said to them, "Render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's." And they marvelled at him. My name's Arthur, and I thank you for joining me as we share some thoughts based on Mark chapter 12, verses 13 to 17. The Pharisees prided themselves on knowing the Scriptures and implementing it in their life. The Herodians were Jewish people who supported King Herod. Herod was king of Israel by the appointment of Rome, but was not even an Israelite. He was an Idumean. And so these two groups had an ongoing debate, because the Herodians supported paying of taxes to Rome. They thought this provides good order to our society, but the Pharisees said, no, this money belongs to God, it shouldn't be given to the Romans. So the Pharisees were particularly nationalistic and were very displeased with the fact that the Romans controlled their society. So normally these two groups would have nothing to do with each other. But the way politics works, everyone is ganging up against Jesus. So when the chief priests, the scribes, and the elders had not been able to overcome Jesus, they sent some of the Pharisees and Herodians. They come to catch him in his words. That is, they come with deceit. They pretend that they have one agenda, to ask an honest question which puzzles them, and to get a definitive answer. And so they seek to flatter Jesus. We know that you are true and care about no one, and that you do not regard the person of men, but teach the way of God in truth. So they are full of flattery. They might know it with their head, but they do not believe it in their heart. If they did, they would be submitting to Jesus' way, seeking to trick him. But the question is simple. Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not? What's the application of the Old Testament scriptures to the situation that we are in? Shall we pay or shall we not pay? Jesus can see their hypocrisy. He can see that they are just trying to catch him in his words. But he still needs to answer the question. And the reason why this is a difficult question, a challenging question, is that if he is to say you should pay taxes to Caesar, then he is evidently going against the whole messianic claim that he is the Messiah, an alternate king who is to take over the rule not only of Israel but of the whole world. But if he says do not pay taxes to Caesar, that taxes should be paid to me because I am the king, then obviously he'll bring the wrath of Rome down upon his head. So, which side will Jesus take? The Pharisees' side or the Herodian side? But Jesus has an answer that amazes them. He asks for the denarius, the coin that is used to pay taxes. When he looks at it, he sees it is imprinted with Caesar's image. Whose image is this? He says. Well, obviously it's Caesar's image. And so he says, well, render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. In other words, he doesn't choose a side. He says Caesar has certain authority, and God has certain authority. And you render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. Therefore God's people do pay their taxes, because God has established the governments of the world. God is sovereign over the whole world. He has placed responsibility for certain things in the hands of men, and those men are accountable for what they do. He doesn't make those men do wrong things, but sometimes they do wrong things. And when they do wrong things, they will be held to account. And he will make sure that when they do wrong things, that they are given advice that this is a wrong thing to do, so that they are guilty of direct disobedience if they do it. This is what's happened in the Old Testament when the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Persians, the Greeks all came against Israel and mistreated Israel. God has in history dealt with those people with judgment, and so God will judge in the future. But at the present time, how do we, as the citizens in the society, live? We are to render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's. Our national government makes rules about a whole host of things, and we are to respect them and to honour them and to follow those rules, except insofar as they directly contradict the things that are God's. And the thing that is God's is that we are to love the Lord our God with all of our heart, soul, mind and strength. We are to give him the glory, for he has established the authorities that exist. They are established for the well-being of society. There is a purpose and a plan in what God has done, but the servants don't always carry it out well. They will be called to account. Our responsibility, for which we will be called to account, is to render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. God.